is a lot different than content or copy in a book you're reading, for example. It is probably surprising to learn, or maybe not for some of you, that only about 20% of the content on a web page is actually read. So a big theme and what we're talking about today is when in doubt, cut it out. So when you think you have your final draft of copy, I know it sounds like a lot, but if you can, try to even cut that down by 50%. And we say that because people who read online are scanning information. So they actually do this, you can see it in the graphic, kind of in an F shape. So what they do is they'll scan first at the very top, they'll scan things at the very beginning of a sentence, and then as they kind of, as their eyes move down the page or as they're scrolling down the page, they're going to be looking at content less and less as the page goes on and the content goes on. So what we really are trying to emphasize today is that you want to put your most important information at the top. And if you can, at the beginning of a sentence or the beginning of a paragraph, you really want to front load that content so that it's not missed by people who are scanning your page. So again, when in doubt, cut it out. And like I said before, if possible, and I know this is another concept we're going to be talking about today, is context is key, especially we are writing for higher ed. And so a lot of the times we will have more sophisticated language or some jargon. So, but if possible, what we want to do to try to make the content more easily understood by a wider audience and to make it more scannable, we want to try to use shorter words, sentences, and paragraphs. And if you can, and again, context is key, you want to try to have one idea or concept per paragraph and even one concept per sentence. Because if you're stuffing a paragraph with a lot of different ideas for an audience that's scanning your content, that's going to be missed. So you want to make sure that, if possible, make it as simple as you can. And another way to make it easier for users of your site to read is to put information in lists, bulleted lists, numbered lists, where possible and where appropriate. We obviously have tools in our WYSIWYG editor to help you do this, and we will give you some other tips on how to make it more scannable and readable for your audience, but that is another great way to just break up content and make it more scannable. So it might be surprising to some of you, but the goal for online content is to write at an 8th grade reading level. And that might sound low, but again, the idea is to allow a wider audience to not only understand your information, but to basically make it understood and so that they're getting the information they need on your page. There are a lot of different tools out there in terms of readability. And what we mean by that is tools that can show you not only how easy it is to read, but what grade level, what US grade level they would rate it at. So again, we're aiming for an 8th grade reading level. And again, we know that with higher ed language and things that we're writing about, it sometimes will be hard to achieve. So what we're caveating this workshop is that we're just trying our best to get it as close to an 8th grade reading level as we can. And then in terms of ease, essentially that's ease of reading. That's going to be around a score of a 60 or 70 based on a few of these tools. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but what we're trying to do is take what we think is our final draft and make it, again, less content and then easier to read, easier for a wider audience to understand. So I'm just going to click into these readability tools just so you can see them. This one is kind of the official grade level test, and you can do this through Word if you have it on your desktop. So this is what it looks like here. This actually is just the instructions for how to bring it up in Word. They have it for 365 if you're doing it on the web, older versions of Office, and then if you're using it for a Mac. So again, a lot of tools out there. This is the kind of official one, but there are also some really great tools. I'm actually going to go into more detail on the Hemingway editor later, but I thought this one is really great. I will kind of go over what it's highlighting here a bit later, but this is another thing where you could actually copy and paste your content and it'll give you some ideas for how to make that more readable. And then this is just one other amongst many readability tools where you can actually either copy and paste your text or put in an entire URL, and it will calculate the readability for you. Please keep in mind that, excuse me, some of these tools across the board won't give you the exact same scores, but it's really just a guide for you to see what your original content is, your readability is, and then what your edited content is. Hopefully, and what we're looking for is that the ease number goes up and the grade level goes down. That's the goal. And I'm going to actually make this big screen again. Oops, there we go. Oh, sorry. I think I'm going the wrong. Oh, here we go. Okay. And I mentioned this before. What we're trying to do is condense it. And how we do this and how the readability and ease scores are utilized with our formulas, it's actually calculating the numbers of syllables per word and the words per sentence. So again, less syllables will mean shorter sentences, meaning it's easier to read and it's at a lower reading level. And it might sound counterintuitive. So we're higher ed. We're academically driven. Our content is going to be authoritative. So why would we, dumb it down, if you will, to an 8th grade reading level? Well, actually, the lower your reading level, and again, we're talking about 8th grade. We don't want to go too low. What we're trying to say is it's actually understood by more readers that it's actually more intelligent content if you're able to write at an 8th grade reading level, as opposed to something that's, for a college age level. So it's actually the opposite of what I think you would originally think. So again, if you're writing at a level that more people can understand your content, it's actually viewed as more intelligent, as opposed to using really convoluted words or, words that are maybe complicated or paragraphs that are too long. That will actually be seen as less intelligent because less people are able to understand it and thus get the information they need that you're trying to provide them. So again, I'm repeating this a lot, but something that you can do to break up your content is use clear headings. So we have lots of resources available about headings in the CMS and how to use them correctly, but this is a great way to break up your content. Again, make it more scannable, give it a bit more breathing room. If you can, and again, context is key, if you can use informal language and avoid jargon. If you do have to use jargon or acronyms, just make sure that you're spelling out these acronyms or giving a short description of what you're talking about so that the reader knows what they're reading, essentially. And then if possible, use an active instead of a passive voice. So it's essentially more conversational and you're writing as if you were speaking. And something that helps with this is actually reading your content out loud. This might seem difficult to do or kind of feel strange, but reading your content out loud is a great way to actually check and see if it is more conversational. And also, again, I'll show you this later, but this Hemingway editor will actually highlight certain phrases if it is written in a passive voice. So it actually tell you if you're writing in a passive voice, and you can change it to more forceful language and write it in more of an active voice. So again, what we try to do is make sure that once a reader lands on our page, they know exactly where they are and they're in the right place. So we want to give them information-rich text and signposts. And what we mean by that are headings and subheadings. And if you can, and again, as I keep saying, context is key. If you can put a summary at the beginning of the page to outline what you're going to be talking about as the readers scroll or scan the information down the page, that's going to be really important. Again, you want to make sure that people who are scanning your page is getting them the information that they need. So if you're putting that at the very top of your page, even if they're scanning, they'll be able to understand that summary and kind of know what you're going to be talking about as the page goes on. Headings are important, subheadings, and then cross-linking is really important as well, making sure that you're pointing readers to secondary information if possible, and you're controlling that message. Something else you can think about when you're writing your content is what's in it for the reader. You can put yourself in the reader's shoes to say, okay, if I was a reader trying to absorb the information that they're trying to present, what answers do I need to the questions I have about, let's say, a program in your college? So you can put yourself in the mind of the reader to say, okay, well, the reader probably wants to know how long it'll take them to complete the program, what classes are involved in the program, maybe the cost, or even what campus they're located on. So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in the mind of the reader to say, am I answering their most basic or frequently asked questions? And am I doing it in a way that's easily understood? So again, we want to front load this content. Um, Unlike, again, a novel, you don't want to do this if you're trying to tell a really interesting story. But what you want to do here for online content is kind of spoil the ending, put it in the very beginning. And why you're doing that, again, not only for readability, ease, and also for the user to know that what the information about, you're telling them they're in the right place from the very beginning. They're not going to try to go to a different web page or even go off your website completely to find that information. They know they're in the right place. But again, depending on the content that you're writing about, sometimes it's tricky to put a summary or to really front load this content in the very beginning, especially if you're kind of writing something that is kind of more of a story or something like that. It could be difficult, but just try your best to do that. And something else that I wanted to point out, so native speakers are going to be scanning your content, but we also want to keep in mind the non-native readers. So again, we have students from all over the world. Obviously, they have to take certain English language tests and things to be able to come to USF. But if they're a non-native reader, they actually don't scan text. They actually will read word for word because they're trying their best to understand the content because it isn't, let's say, their first language or something that they're really familiar with. So they will skip whole sections of text. And they'll also do something called sufficing. So they'll read, they'll stop, and they'll kind of guess the rest. So this is why it's even more important to put the most important information at the very, very beginning of your page, the very beginning of your sentence, and your paragraphs. You really just want to make sure that not only is the native reader who's scanning the content getting what they need to, but for non-native readers who are just skipping whole sections of text because, it's too complicated to try to ingest all of this information that you're putting there. You want to make sure that what you're trying to do is put the most important information at the top, and then details can come later. So again, it's important to have small sections of text, group content that is alike. And if you can, again, context is key, you're only introducing new ideas at the beginning of that page and then supporting details as the readers scan or scroll down your page. So another way to think about this is the inverted pyramid style. And you can even think about this. You can think about this in terms of, let's say, although it's written for web, let's say it was printed in like a newspaper, and there's only so much real estate or content they can print on a physical newspaper. You want to make sure that if they're actually literally cutting off the last section of what you're talking about in your article, for example, that the most important information is still printed in the newspaper. So again, you want to put your most important information at the top. Who, what, where, when, why, and how is really what you want to put at the top, and then your supporting details as they come. You could expand on the main point or as you go down the page or introduce supporting evidence, but you really don't want to be introducing brand new information more than halfway down the page or at the bottom of the page. It really is just going to be missed by both those native and non-native readers. And again, doing that by descending order of importance. So again, most important at the top, least important at the bottom. And another thing you can do with this is if it's something that's really like information heavy or rich, what you can do is, again, summarize the content, put your main points, but then link out to a separate document or a separate page that gives them more information. That's something that you can do if you don't want to put too much information on one page. And again, once you think you're finished, try to trim it down if you can. And then again, link to those supporting pages with more information if needed. And I'll hand it off to Annalise.
Hey, can everyone see me, hear me? I think so. Okay.
Sounds good.
So switching gears here just a little bit. If you're in the English department, you've probably heard of PAD before. I'm going to share the knowledge of PAD here as well. Um, Considering PAD, we are talking about purpose, audience, and design when we are delivering content or designing content or sharing information. So it's important to look at a specific page. Say you have a research page about a study that one of your faculty members is embarking on. You'd want to think about the purpose of this page. Is the purpose to share information about the study? Is it to recruit participants for the study? Who is the specific audience for this content? And then how does that information inform how we should design or lay out the page? And Grace, you can, thanks. Grace talked a little bit about jargon before. So we want to generally remove jargon, but again, context is key. So using clear descriptions and verbiage when possible is a good rule of thumb, but also considering the context, if we're using that example of looking at a page about a particular research study, we can't just eliminate all of the jargon on that page because it's relevant to the purpose um, of that page, which may be to explain some complex information. So a good rule of thumb is to remove jargon if we're writing for like the About USF page, where we're just wanting to give some information about who we are as a university. But again, with that example about the research study, that would be an appropriate place to have more technical jargon because it's applicable and relevant to the content of that page. Another thing we can do when designing the layout of a page or choosing how to display our content, we can take detailed information and we can break it up. Detailed information can live within its own section. We can use paragraph breaks, and we can link detailed information from the main page. A lot of people already do this. So again, none of this is rocket science. A lot of you all are doing these best practices already, but it's good to revisit these best practices. So linking to like a PDF or linking to another page where it has like the full details of the research study, for example, or the requirements or what's going to happen on day 1, day 2, day 3. Another thing you can do is display detailed information as bullet points because again, that's breaking up the information so it's not just a huge wall of text. You can also nest detailed information within an accordion so that the user to the page can click on it to expand it and then click on it to hide it again so they can have a little bit control in how they navigate through that more dense or detailed information. A good rule of thumb again is to be as streamlined as possible. So we want to remove barriers. You can task yourself with reading it again and asking yourself, does this feel accessible or does this still feel like there could be some barriers for certain users? You can take on the persona of a different user. Some of the users that Grace had mentioned, there are different people visiting the sites and reading this content in different ways. You can put on your hat as a non-native English speaker and read it through their eyes and ask yourself if the content is accessible or could we do a better job making it more accessible, removing barriers in that way. Another good practice is reading your content out loud. This may seem or feel a little silly at times, but reading content out loud can actually help to understand or get a sense of if your content is too wordy or if it needs to flow a little bit better or if it sounds like truncated and awkward and difficult. So reading out loud is a good practice to try with your content. You can ask yourself in this process if it sounds personable or if it sounds really robotic and like not inviting to the reader or the user. This is also a good way you can practice or get some feedback on seeing if your content is too long-winded. Are you getting tired reading your own content out loud? Maybe we should condense it a little bit. Is the main point or call to action being conveyed up front? You want to check in there, and reading this content out loud is a good way to do that. You can do that either with yourself or with a colleague or even with us during like a meeting if we do a content audit later on. Another note about detailed information. Again, we want to cut down the length while keeping the important details. So it's a bit of a balance between the two. We want to provide links to more information where we can. And a note on links here. Links can help us control the user's journey and allowing you to link to your own content helps your pages rise in Google. So you might have heard of like cross-linking before or backlinking in regards to SEO or search engine optimization best practices. But if you are linking to your own content and your own articles or documents or materials, those can help to give you more like points or help you rise in the rankings in Google so that you're coming up in those search engine results higher than maybe some of our competitors. So that is just a note on another way that we can make detailed information work for us and the user or the reader. So they're doing a great job at um, condensing walls of text by, putting it in a resource that's in a PDF. And then we're also kind of getting to shape the user's journey a bit as they can decide if they want to click into those. And if they do click into those, then they're staying like within our content, within our pages, which ultimately helps our uh, our brand and our site. A note on images. It's important if we can to avoid just plain stock images. We actually have USF specific assets. Many of you know of these already, but you can access these through Binder. It's the USF brand portal, and we have a lot of really great stock images that are USF specific. So if you can, it's always best to use any of these. They're just going to be more relevant to us, to our brand, to our content. Um, and there's that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Um, this relates to like reducing those huge walls of text. Like, can a picture supplement or extend the message that we are trying to convey with fewer words? Can these two things, this paragraph and this image complement each other and work together? Um, can these images do some of that heavy lifting so that we don't have to write an essay for someone to sift through to find what they're looking for on the page? A note on image descriptions or alt text. Of course, you all know this as well. Be sure to include proper alt text for accessibility purposes. This streamlines messages for screen readers and can aid in um, helping to make sure that everyone is getting the content that they need. Another thing that we want to do is keep content up to date. And even the pages that we are responsible for as content managers in UCM, we are so busy sometimes assisting you all. We need to do our own content inventory and audit and update some of our pages. So kind of like Grace was saying, as we started this out, we are learning along with you all, and this is something that we need to do sometimes for our own pages too. So some examples you'll see in a bit come from some of our own pages. And that's just a side note, but it's really important to keep content up to date. Readers are actually wary of old content, and I'm sure you know this as a user of anything out there. If you visit a website and something is linking to a PDF from 2019, that's going to feel old and outdated and inconsistent, and the person is going to be wary of your brand or your content. That makes sense. It's important to conduct a content audit with us. We can do this with you in sections. This can be guided. This is a process that we are just starting to have space and time for. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, it's important to update content every like 9 months or so. So maybe like every, academic year, unless the information stays the same. So it could be good to consider a content audit calendar for your pages or your site as well.
Great, thank you, Annalise. So I'm going to do my first example, and then Annalise will do hers. We, like we said, wanted to take a stab at our own content. So what you're seeing here is the locations page for the Tampa campus. And I'm just kind of walk you through what I did in terms of editing this page, again, for readability, for ease. So this was the original text. As you can see, it's 3 larger paragraphs. And again, what we're trying to do is cut down syllables, sentences, paragraphs, essentially. So this was my first edited draft. So as you can see from here's the original again, 3 paragraphs. It's broken up, there's less words. But what I wanted to do is actually put it into that Hemingway editor just to try it out and see what it showed me. So I don't want this to be too jarring, but this is actually in real time how I edited this section. So this is actually 11 minutes of me editing these my first draft, and I just kind of sped it up into 30 seconds. So this is just for you to kind of see in real time how I did it. And as this is going, I'll just kind of explain the Hemingway editor. And again, this is just another free tool that we're using. So what they'll do is they'll highlight things in yellow if it's a complex sentence and it's too lengthy. So that is just trying to get you to split those sentences or shorten them. If it's in red, it means that the sentence is too dense or complicated. It might kind of lose readers, so trying to make it less convoluted, try editing the sentence. If it's in purple, you can utilize a simpler word. And then if it's in blue, it'll actually tell you again if it's in a passive voice. So this was actually the original content. And this is actually the actual like web app for this. And it tells you right here why it's highlighted a certain way. So as you can see, a lot of red, some yellow. We have things in blue that are more passive. Even the word multiple, they're actually asking you to try to find a simpler term for this. So again, it's just another tool you can use. We're not going to be perfect. We're just trying to utilize what's out there just to make all of our content more easily accessible. So this is the kind of my final draft. And as you can see, it went from, come on, these 3 large paragraphs to much shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences. And you can even see here, I'm not even utilizing, which I should be, things like information-rich images or something that supports the text. I definitely can do that. We're talking about the Tampa campus. This is a perfect example of using our digital asset manager or the DAM to pull amazing campus photos. And it would really liven up the page, it would break up the content, and again, support the information that we're already talking about here. And I just wanted to show you, I actually ran the original text against the final draft. And I actually did this through the official Flesch Kincaid grade level test, which is the one through Word. So originally, my reading ease, the reading ease of that page was 34. Again, we want to try to get between 60 and 70. Even you can see here, I didn't make it that high, but we did increase by a lot. So it's up to 48.6. So again, the higher the reading ease between that 0 and 100 scale, the better and the easier it is to read. So for ease, for both ease and for grade level, again, they use a certain formula, and you could technically do this by hand. You could actually count the syllables in your words and the average sentence length. But again, Word does it for you, so I wouldn't recommend. But for both of these, they use their own special formula for average sentence length and average number of syllables per word. And that's how they generate these scales. So originally, this grade level, and again, we're talking about US grade level. So this was like a college level, believe it or not. And again, I use this, it's not like I changed the content, I just changed how it was written. Again, shorter sentences, shorter words, shorter paragraphs, and it actually brought the grade level down to about a ninth grade reading level, which isn't 8th grade, but it's pretty close. So this is just to show you that, again, we're not going to be perfect, but these tools are really helpful, and just trying to understand maybe where information gets too lengthy, maybe something where we can link out to more information, but again, trying to keep it simple, scannable, and accessible. And then here is Annalise's example.
Okay, yes, so we have this page right here, the About Us index. We have the original on the left, and we have a little bit of a rewrite on the right. And actually, Grace, if you could go back to the slide real quick. I wanted to ask you all if you wanted to just tell me what you notice between the two. If anyone wants to volunteer. Having experience in teaching, I am comfortable with silences, and I will wait until we have someone who wants to volunteer. Yes,
Oh, Jason has his hand up.
You want to know the difference between these two, the edited and original?
Sorry, can you say that again?
You want to know the difference between the edited and the original?
Yeah, just tell me some things that you notice between the left and the right.
Just looking at the top section, the bulleted list is just easier to read. You've gotten rid of the bold, and there's no bold versus unbold, and so it just makes the list nice and easy to read. And you've also rounded off the numbers to just again make it easier to read.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just me too, and there's no one right way, but when I was reading the one on the left, I was reading like founded, 1956, undergraduates, 37,338. Like it's a little bit, it feels kind of choppy when
Like
this
rigid.
is like, yeah, and we want this to just kind of like flow a little bit. So I was thinking for the bullet points, we could just write founded in 1956. Nearly 50,000 students. Like I feel like there's a little bit more of a flow there. And you'll hear me say feel a lot. I feel like a lot of this is kind of like based on feeling, both visually, both how this information like comes to you. Like, does it feel like a lot of work on the left looking at those longer paragraphs? Does the right feel a little simpler? Catherine in the comments here said too that shorter bullets equal less lines of text seems easier to read. Great. Anyone else want to share anything that they noticed? Carlos, yes.
Yeah, I'm also noticing on the right, it's just easier to scan. There's headers, so I can quickly scan and find out what particular parts of the content is about. There are the links that are green. I believe those are either I'm assuming those are links. If they're not links, I
Yep.
can read
Mm-hmm.
easily. There are links, right? Yeah. Then I can easily see those as well. That stands out to me and it gives me more information a lot faster if I'm scanning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the spacing between I'm overdoing it, I'm sorry, but I like
No,
this.
no,
The
you're fine.
spacing between the paragraphs is better. It's easier to scan. It's quicker to read.
Yeah. That's definitely what we're going for because the text on the left, it does kind of feel more like a story that we have to like read, like an essay or like a chapter book. And we do want to provide something that's more scannable. So we do want to have more white space. We do want to condense the text where we can and linking, like you said, like on the left, I do see number one best value in the third paragraph, but it's not linked and it's not really drawn attention to. It's kind of like hidden or buried in there. And on the right, you can, click into that and you can see where that goes to, and you can really see that USF actually is a number one best value. It's not just something that we're saying, like there's an ethos to that as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I just
that's
want to
just,
quickly, oh, I'm sorry. I
yeah,
just wanted to
no,
state
go
that
ahead.
it's a great analogy about reading on the left, reading it. It's more like reading an essay or reading a book. On the right, it's about getting that information across a lot quicker and easier and
Yeah,
scannable. So that's a
yeah,
good analogy.
yeah, thank you. And us, people who are in higher education, we do have a tendency to want to kind of like, or it's just kind of routine. We've been trained or accustomed to writing in lengthy ways to show like how smart we are. Or, I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but there is a shift in writing for the web versus writing, academic papers that we kind of do want to be aware of when we're approaching content for the web. Yeah, I think that's probably it here on this slide. Okay, and I think this is our last slide, but we just wanted to end with some ideas for where to start. So if you are looking at your own site or your own pages, maybe start with looking at your most popular pages and seeing maybe when that content was updated last. Does the content need to change or should it stay the same? Start to kind of ask some questions about your content and consider using some readability tools like Grace had shared. And those readability tools are there in the comments of this chat as well. Read it out loud to either yourself or to a colleague. As I was revising that page too, I was reading out loud because I wanted to see if it flowed or if things could be constructed a little bit easier so that they weren't so choppy or too long-winded. Focus on clarity, brevity, concision. When in doubt, cut it out. Remember that writing is a process, it is a draft. Um, I I took another look at the page that I was editing and I removed some other paragraph that I felt was a little redundant. So ask yourself, is this other paragraph really needed or is it kind of doing something that the paragraph before it was doing? Again, think about the purpose of the specific page. Think about the specific audience for that specific page. And then design the content of that page in a way that relates to that purpose or that audience. And when we say design, remember it doesn't necessarily mean just like images, although that's part of it. Design is layout of the page. Like, do we want to use bullet points, accordion, or just more like white space in general? And then again, reach out to collaborate. So if you are ever wanting to look at your content, consider reaching out to us, consider reaching out to your team or your content contributors and making like a little project out of it so that we can have our content up to date and working for us to attract students, faculty, staff to our university.